The Singapore Games Association says Comic-Con remains a powerful venue for developers of indie titles. 60 made-in-Singapore video games are on show at this year's Comic-Con. They are also launched together as an SG60 collection on game distribution platform Steam. Now, the association adds it's working with the government to improve support for developers.
Because the development cycle of a video game can go anywhere from 2 to 5 years, the amount of time that it takes to create a product is extremely long, which is why additional support either from government or investors is the kind of switch that needs to be turned on to enable a more active and vibrant industry in any country at all.
The annual Comic-Con takes place over the weekend, and it features international comic artists as well as collectibles and merchandise of popular shows. There will also be tabletop board games available to play. And you heard from him earlier, but Jamie Ng, who's also creative strategy lead at live streaming platform Twitch, is here in studio to share more. Jamie, welcome to the studio. Well, let's start a bit more about, Comic-Con bringing games, anime, collectibles, comics even. So why do you think games is really starting to be a big inspiration point for pop culture?
Well, Singapore Comic-Con is named Comic-Con, but it doesn't only feature comics. It is a celebration of pop culture in general, and pop culture is, basically built upon shared experiences of young people, especially, and especially for people in my generation and younger generations. What that shared experience is a lot of video games, and it's become this shared experience that we've all taken part of. On top of that, the games industry is such a huge industry globally, making up over $180 billion, which eclipses the sum of the film and music industry together. And just within Southeast Asia, it's $16 billion large in this region as well, which is why it makes sense to actually feature games as part of the celebration of popular culture.
And within that celebration, we have the show floor, with dedicated zones for gaming, there's tournaments, there's community play. So how is the Singapore Gaming Association helping to shape or support these experiences and also the growth of the whole sector?
Well, we work very closely with the organizers as well as companies within the industry such as Elephant, such as Ubisoft, and the IMDA as well, supporters that are here to actually want to support and grow the industry as a whole. The other thing that SGGA does, the Singapore Games Association does, is actually a lot of background work supporting the infrastructure, building connections among bigger and smaller studios as well. On top of that, we also create a lot of mini networking events to make sure that developers are not alone when they are building their games and following their passions.
Yeah, it seems like among that, it's a challenge of funding and also talent that's often been cited as two of the biggest difficulties faced by the sector. What is the reality on the ground right now, you think, when it comes to financing games and developing the right talent?
The reality around the world is that gaming is a very creative process, and creative industries as a whole have difficulty in finding talent, retaining them. And as the soundbite earlier mentioned, or I mentioned in the soundbite earlier, the development time for a video game as a piece of media, as a piece of content is extremely long. So sustaining investment and sustaining jobs for a long time is actually quite difficult.
So that's a key challenge. Now, in the meantime, SGGA is nurturing local developers' IPs and also the local ecosystem. Can you paint a picture of how exactly it is doing that? And is there some kind of master plan or a long-term strategy that you're really working towards?
Yeah, so, firstly, the Singapore Games Association is a completely volunteer-run association. There are 8 of us. Myself, I've got a day job and I work at Twitch. Which means that, there is some amount of balancing that we need to do between our day jobs and the SGGA, but we're all driven by passion. However, in the scope of the SGGA, we support everybody from students who are learning about game design or ancillary kind of courses, supporting up to independent studios as well, who are potentially coming out with their first few games without major funding, all the way up to global studios from China, from Europe, who have opened up shop in Singapore. We support them by firstly, like I mentioned, creating networks for them to kind of meet each other and exchange ideas and skills. But also we work to bring their interests to the government, especially to bodies like IMDA, ESG, and EDB as well.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Jamie, that gaming is worth more than $16 billion in Southeast Asia.
That's
so how
right.
close would you say Singapore is as on its way to becoming a gaming hub for the region?
Yeah, I would say that we are the closest now than we have ever been. It's absolutely a goal of Singapore, the Singapore Games Association, to be the leader. We got to be number one. But that said, we have very strong associations and very, very strong ties with the rest of the ASEAN members and similar associations around Southeast Asia and around the world as well. I think it's a matter of ape together strong. We really want to band together, exchange ideas, and kind of grow together as a bigger gaming industry. At the end of the day, Singapore remains this amazing country for talent, for development, and for ideas. But as a market to sell games, we remain relatively small. So we do want to make sure that our games are well represented all over the world, and they have that space to breathe in markets in other countries. There are some very good examples of games developed here, but then finding its audience in Taiwan or Japan, that is just unexpected. So, localization, for example, and making sure that games are marketable overseas as well is extremely important to us.
And Comic-Con would have been a good way to start doing that.
Exactly.
Jamie, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. I've been chatting with Jamie Ng, who is Secretary of the Singapore Games Association. He's also Creative Strategy Lead at Twitch.